You are listening to 104.1 KQTH, Tucson's News and Talk. I am the beautiful man. Standing right across from me is my sexy sidekick, Ross. Taking your telephone calls at 751-1041, the mysterious, magical Matt. Yes, my friends, this is a celebration. Celebration of your relationship with conservative talk radio, brought to you by 104.1 KQTH. Unregulated immigrants. That was the term. Unregulated immigrants. All I had to do was think about Al Sharpton, and I'll remember that. You have no rights to unregulated rights. Unregulated immigrants. We're going to have an update about the unregulated immigrants that are in Oracle in the 5 o'clock hour. But right now, my friends, I have in studio retired Colonel Pappy Russell, and he is retired as an A-10 driver, and he's in the studio today. And it dawned on me that we had a conversation before about similar issues, and the reason why I'm taking time out to bring him back is because in that time since I last spoke with Pappy Russell, I put the invitation out to McSally to come on the show to answer some questions. And I said, before we can move forward, we have to take care of a few things that are in the past that came up that I had issues with. I was never taken up on that, but I did suspend the questioning to bring her in to talk about the A-10. That was last year. And in that interview, in my opinion, she stepped in it again and she decided to lead from behind because she said that she would let other people take the lead on trying to save the A-10 and she would follow in behind. Since that time, McSally has been made over. It's been a wonderful makeover. And since that time, she's had the RNC and a lot of the heavy establishment members of the Republican Party get all in behind the effort to get her elected as Congress. We have Boehner on board. We have Ricky Boehner on board, and I keep hearing Eric Cantor on board. And I've been hearing rumbles that McCain is now coming out hard and heavy for McSally. Now, people have called into the show over the last couple of weeks and said, James, you should be neutral. You should not get involved in this. You should give both sides. And my response to that is no. They're not being neutral. They're jumping in not only with rhetoric, they're jumping in with money. So this is my opportunity to illustrate or to talk about the serious issues that I have. And the serious issues that I have really come down to integrity. Everybody knows with politics, you put on your best clothes, you put on your makeup, you say things that should be emanating from within. But if you can't do that, you have to make stuff up. I'm sick of the blank slate that politicians put out there and then the media or the establishment paint. So I don't want to do that. So how do you get around that? You talk to the people that work with the individual. You talk with the people that served, in this case, with McSally. And that's why I have retired Colonel Pappy Russell on. And I want to start by getting a little bit of background on you. Now, you are local. You're like a wildcat, right?
That's correct. Born and raised in Arizona.
Born and raised in Arizona. Okay. You became an A-10 pilot, and you still have Tucson as your home.
That's correct. Have been in the same house for the last 16 years in CD2, and always planned to retire here as I went to school here, as you said, and then promised myself one day I'd retire here. So here we are.
And here you are, and enjoying it. It's beautiful.
Yes, it is.
All right, I love it. I'm new here, and I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying? Now, how do you know Martha McSally? How long have you known her, served with her? Were you guys, were you her superior? Was she your superior? What's the background?
No, I was superior in date of rank throughout our careers. I met her about, for the first time, almost 2 decades ago, when I was assigned as an A-10 instructor pilot here in Tucson at 355th Wing, Davis Mountain. She was then assigned to that as well, and that's the first time I met her over 20 years ago.
So you've over the 20 years you've served. You said you were her superior in rank.
I was in rank and would have been in deed as well because I was assigned to go to that squadron as an ADO, which in the following year, after some incidents occurred, I became the director of operations. But had I stayed, I was assigned to stay home from a deployment to Kuwait to run things in the squadron. And she was going through an upgrade program in the A-10 for four-ship flight lead qualification.
Now there's all these stories out there, and there's some of them I want to get into from the past, and that's the whole gas thing. I'll say that till later though. I had a lot of fun with that because of course my wife doesn't put gas in her car, so I can understand how Sally could take off without putting gas in the A-10.
Well,
but,
I can't.
Boy, see, that's where because I have fun with it, but I'm going to get into the serious aspects of this with you a little bit later because it does speak to character and it speaks to how there was a clear-cut double standard. But you actually brought this to my attention when you were looking at her website. Some claims that she made on the website really struck a nerve with you, and I've been told from other drivers that it struck a nerve with people who were in her unit as well, and it's surrounding an incident actually of two people who died while in service, and the way she depicts the story. And what was it about the way that was depicted on the website that kind of rubbed you the wrong way?
Well, first of all, in both the incidents I think you're referring to, there's very little there that has to do with what truly happened because I was intimately involved in both of those events. The first happened to be an accident that directly affected my life because I was going through a requalification course in the A-10, and we had been told by the squadron that Miss Sally was assigned to that I would not be deploying with the unit. However, an unfortunate mishap came about to result in the death of a Captain Amy Svoboda. And so that right on the heels of that, I was told that I needed to start gearing up for my deployment because I was going to go in her place to Kuwait, which I did. The other three individuals that were in that formation flight, because I know all the details of what happened that night, were they were on what's called the South TAC, which is tactical range out near Helaban. They were supposed to deploy as well, but they were held back in order to be interviewed by the Accident Investigation Board. They eventually did rejoin us in Kuwait after their interviews had been completed and were no longer needed. They came over commercially and joined us in Kuwait, where we spent the next 3 months or so going over the events of that evening. And at no time during that conversation did Miss McSally's name surface. Yet on her post, she stated that she went over and took on-scene command. And as I said, at that time she was in an upgrade program, meaning that even if she was airborne, which none of us recall, and we have contacted each of the individuals that were on that range that fateful night, none of them can recall anything that she reveals in her story as being accurate or truthful. So it just strikes me as odd that you would use a tragic event like that as something to place glory on yourself. I don't understand that, especially whenever the facts that were revealed there are not those that are shared by those that were particularly involved with, associated with it. And in my case, I became very close to all of those members that were in that flight because I spent the next several months with them over in Kuwait flying combat missions. Came back, and by the time I got back, she had moved on to a different squadron.
Now, as you're telling the story, I'm looking at you, and I can see that the emotion is still there, the emotion of what took place plus the anger. It's a mixture there. And you asked the question, you don't understand why someone would use that situation to elevate themselves. And I started off the show with a story. I don't know if you were listening. I'm not gonna tell it right now because I know there's a second story as well. And what I'm trying to get at here simply is I'm not trying to beat up anybody unnecessarily, but I cannot stand the whole blank slate way of running things anymore. And when there is a history that is easily, I mean, verifiable, that you could check out and people choose not to for whatever reasons, kind of pisses me off. And so that's my motivation here. And I'm sorry to take you back to a place where obviously it's painful, but I'm going to ask you to do it one more time when we come back, because there's another story on the website, her website as well, that a lot of people have been talking about as being a little bit, or maybe very much so, an embellishment on the truth to advance her own narrative. I am in studio with retired Colonel Pappy Russell. You're listening to 104.1 KQTH. You are listening to 104.1 KQTH, Tucson's News and Talk. We're in studio with retired Colonel Pappy Russell. He's served in the Air Force, an A-10 driver. We're talking about a narrative here. So often we, especially in the last 15, 20 years, politicians run for office, and of course we all have a history, but that history never makes it out there. And then sometimes, if you're lucky, you find out some things. And a lot of times, well, you know, looking at President Obama, we still don't know. Things are seeping out, but we still don't know. And these things that are hidden speak to character. And one of the things that has always bothered me about one of our candidates, Martha McSally, because I didn't know her before then, is when she ran initially on her being a fighter pilot. All right. And then we saw the commercials, and then some of the stories came out, and I brought them up on the air a couple of years ago. They're still hanging out there. Never had a chance to have them addressed because she wouldn't come in to talk about it. And the first go around, actually, some of her supporters came after me. I'm like, all I have is questions. So what I do is I'll talk to the people who knew her best at the time she's claiming she did what she did. Now, there's two things that popped up. Some of the stuff is on our Facebook page. One of the things that disturbed my guests, retired Colonel Pappy Russell, is some of the claims that McSally made to her relationship to two deceased A-10 pilots. We just talked about one, but there was another one out there as well. His name was Captain Button. Now, I remember this story because when I first came to town, there was the mystery of a pilot A-10 took off. It was headed towards Colorado, and he completely disappeared. And that had been investigated, and it turned out, I don't know what the official, officially what was said, but I always heard that it was a suicide or a possible suicide.
That's what the evidence speaks to. It's never been truly proven, but once again, this, in my opinion, appears to be an opportunity based upon injecting yourself into a tragedy that was recognized. I was called in. This happened about a month before Captain Svoboda's death. I was called into the command post immediately to be a part of the crisis action team and start trying to reconstruct what happened to Captain Craig Button, why we believe he went and did what he did, what we think happened. He was carrying 500-pound live bombs to those, what his track was, all the rest. Part of that was trying to establish who his character was. What would cause him to do something like this? So I had the opportunity to speak to many of his classmates in his initial qualification course, at which time I was asked by those individuals, who is this person? I said, well, apparently she claims to be a very close friend of Captain Button, and that's why she's involved in this story now. They've never heard of her. Well, I've been through plenty of upgrade programs in my life, and one thing that you do very much so is socially and professionally interact a great deal with your classmates. If they had been as close of friends as is being suggested, they would have known. My opinion, they weren't. They were of an age to have attended the academy at the same time, so they may have been acquaintances. I have no idea. But she was certainly not, according to his classmates, involved in any of the activities that were going on in that particular